is to listen deeply.
We're going to have a deep breath.
There's no winner in this unless everyone wins.
Breathing deep into our heart.
Incubating the seeds of a new culture.
Us awakening to our dreams, the manifestations of creations for a healthy earth, a thriving
It's much easier to just unconditionally love everybody.
We're in an awakening process.
Evolving, and that really the act is for us to be nature, to act as nature, and that's
breathing
super
deep into our heart and acknowledging the gift that we are. Welcome. Hello. Welcome, Awaken Dream Synergy and Earth. This is our second broadcast on using StreamYard and live to YouTube and Facebook. So I see we have a couple of our friends online who see that we're here, but we're still keeping this quiet, and we'll have this live broadcast on YouTube available and on Facebook. For our friends, for ourselves, for our creations. So welcome home, humanity, to Awaken Dream Earth. We're actually broadcasting from downtown Tulum in a nice little place near Palma Central. We're a growing conscious collective who are nurturing a series of podcasts, workshops, conscious projects, technologies, retreats, and all kinds of activated experiences, communities, activities, people, products, projects, super cool, such as today's project is Harlan's Transportals. We'll be discussing what goes into making a transportal and what it is. It's basically Harlan is using sacred geometry to create these amazing live building structures that we can go in and feel the vibration of the sounds of some earth frequency vibrations, I believe is what Harlan said, as we're sitting in a sacred geometric portal. And people use these portals for breath work, ritual, ceremonies, dreamscaping, all kinds of things, sound experiences. And it just sounds super potent. They've been in Burning Man, a bunch of festivals, and they've been in they're in some private homes and sacred sites and super amazing places, such as where Harlan lives. And he's going to share with us his inspiration, why he's created this, the idea behind the sacred geometry of the creation and how it connects to ourselves and the earth, and why it's divine or can help us in our evolution of consciousness, and then what they look like and where they've been and where they're going. So Harlan, will you please tell us a little bit about yourself? Let's first actually do a guided meditation really quickly. We usually do a guided meditation in the beginning. So if you just hold on for one moment, and we'll all take a deep breath in, as we are a conduit, we are a portal. So take a deep breath into your heart, and then expanding out through your heart, and taking a deep breath in from the stars and from the sun into the top of your head, into your heart, holding it, feeling ourselves settle into ourselves, and exhale through the heart out, expanding through the heart. And now again, breathing in from the center of the earth into our feet, into our bottom, up our spine, into our heart. And expanding out through the heart. And breathing into the heart from all directions, the field of love, gratitude, beautiful creations, and connections into the heart. And expand out through the heart. Breathing in through the heart. And out. On the next breath in, hold your air and see all the light becoming more vibrant in the heart. Knowing that you're connected to yourself and all these amazing, vibrant, pulsing creatures on earth. with heart, from heart to heart to heart to heart, linking and weaving the dream that we create together. And then exhale, connecting your heart to all the hearts of the world that you've imagined in your circle and beyond. And breathing in all the grace, purity, love, gratitude, the pure, elevated, high vibrations into your heart. Holding it and letting it mix and whirl and whiz around your body as your heart pumps and pulses. And when you exhale, imagining you're connecting to the 6 people around you, 6 hearts, sending energy from your heart, your pure, loving energy to these 6 hearts around you, and then breathing back in. And then 3 more hearts above you, and 3 more hearts below you, 6 more. Now imagine that you're surrounded by beautiful hearts that understand and connect with your heart and support you along your dream journey through life. And that all these hearts are interwoven with other hearts.
Yeah, I got it. Do you need to go to the store?
And that we are a sacred geometry of interwoven, interlacing human hearts. And so welcome back to feeling connected to your heart and feeling connected to your world. And welcome, Harlan. Oh, yay, we've got a few more people. Thank you for joining us for our heart connectedness. I'd love to look at this when we're doing these visualizations and these dream invocations and these guided meditations, working with the energy of our heart light and then how it connects to the sacred geometry. So Harlan's going to share with us the different sacred geometries and also that vision that I had with the heart, connecting with the 6 around us, the 3 above and the 3 below. So when we get there, Harlan, let's definitely re-tap into that. So are you ready? Would you introduce yourself first and then I'll add your stream? Okay.
Yeah, and I guess you could probably put the screen up because that's part of the introduction. So this story goes back, my journey begins with my interest in actually creating future environments inspired by Buckminster Fuller and other visionaries and how we can inhabit the earth in a beautiful, sacred, sustainable way. But we're not going to be talking about that. But as you can see, the overarching reason why I build the Transportals is to awaken that consciousness. So the website Portal to the New Earth is all about the whole story about how we can create this new, beautiful, sustainable, regenerative environment for humans and all of life to live together. Like to act as nature, like your little introductory video said. So there's also the website which this links to, which is Transportals, and you'll be able to dive in deeper on that. So what we're going to be talking, and so my background started me off by studying those, your future environment, studying environmental design, and then, starting to go to Burning Man in 1999 and seeing all these giant art installations that you can climb on, go inside of, interact with, inspired me to start creating these transportals, these various sacred geometrical portal installations that use color and sound and in them to facilitate a space that at first I called them keys to shifting the earth into the next dimension. And through starting to build them, I realized that they work as a multidimensional vibrational energy alignment tool, is how I like to describe them, by using these geometries to create space for your people, vibrational energy bodies to align with the earth. So we'll get into all of that. So the way, though, we're going to, instead of just diving right into talking about the portals, we're going to start off by the underlying principles, the sacred geometry, and all the things that are utilized in the portals. So if we're ready, or what else do you want to say, Denise, before we dive into, these detail of the golden ratio and the 3-dimensional geometries that I employ?
Well, I'm just really excited that some of our people from Awaken Dream Earth are super excited to hear you, and synergy, to synergize, Harlan, because there are people who've done virtual reality. And then we have Ed Lance from Dimensions, who's also here. And I invited Ed Lance to come into the backstage. So Ed Lance, please check your Telegram, and you can actually be in conversation with Harlan. And if anybody else wants to be backstage from Awaken Dream Synergy and Earth, please telegram me, and I'll bring you in backstage so you can participate in the discussion with Harlan. So Harlan, just go ahead, and I love what you're doing, and people that are here, you're also welcome to ask questions in the comments section, and I can bring your questions to the fray of, or the full of our discussion. So go ahead, Harlan. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, and there's a lot of stuff I want to cover, and I do tend to go pretty fast, but I'll try to keep it as concise and not too fast so you can absorb it. So one of the first principles that is key to my portals, but key to everything in life, is this the concept of the golden ratio, or golden proportion, or golden section, which is just the fact that you can take any length and divide it at a certain point where the shorter is to the longer section as the longer section is to the whole. And it's this irrational number. 0.618 is to 1 as 1 is to 1.618. We're going to dive into this a little bit deeper. This is just showing it's in one section, but it also can be made into a golden rectangle where the sides of the rectangle are in golden ratio. And by dividing the rectangle into a square and another smaller golden rectangle, you can continuously divide it into smaller squares and golden rectangles. And when you inscribe an arc into these squares, it creates what's known as a golden spiral, which is also found throughout all of nature. So here's a diagram that just shows how it's found throughout nature, like in the digits of your hand. Each section of your fingers is golden ratio to the next. Your belly button divides your height at the golden ratio. It's discovered throughout all the proportions of the human body, but as you can see, nautilus shells, or just in like a pentagram, is divided exactly in golden ratio. And then the ancients knew this, so we find in all the ancient art and architecture the golden ratio. So another way to understand the golden ratio is through what we know as the Fibonacci sequence, discovered in the 1400s by a mathematician by the name of Fibonacci. And it's interesting because we use the Greek letter phi to denote the golden ratio. So anyway, Fibonacci sequence starts with 0 and 1, and by adding them together to get the next number. So 0 and 1 is 1, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 1, 3. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere, but then it starts to diverge. And as you see in this diagram, the higher up you go, the closer the two numbers come to being exactly the golden ratio. When you go up to, as high as you want, it gets closer and closer and closer to this irrational number. But as you can see, just by 3 digits up, it goes out to 5 decimal places, 1.61803. So that's it for the golden ratio. It's such a deep rabbit hole. You could talk about that all day. So now we're going to dive into the basics of three-dimensional geometry that are the foundations of space. So the Greek philosopher Plato identified these 5 shapes as being the only 5 shapes that have the regular face. So it's an equilateral triangle, square, or pentagon, and having the same number of these faces around each vertex. So what you see is the first of these is the tetrahedron, 4 equilateral triangles, an octahedron, 8 equilateral triangles, a square, a cube which has 6 squares, the dodecahedron, do is 2, deca is 10, so it's 12 pentagons, and the icosahedron with 20 triangles. And we're going to dive into these. So here's a diagram from my upcoming book that instead of the animation, so you can see them all stacked, and also the way that they nest one inside of another, which is a very interesting principle. Each one can nest inside the next. But what we're going to see here is how you can generate each platonic solid from each other. So starting with the tetrahedron, and you truncate off all the vertexes equally, it becomes an octahedron. And when you truncate the corners off of an octahedron equally, it will become a cube. It's going to stop halfway there. Halfway between the cube and octahedron is another shape called a cube octahedron, with the 8 triangles of the octahedron and the 6 squares of a cube. You continue to truncate off the corners all the way, it becomes a cube. So if you truncated off the corners of a cube, it would just go back to an octahedron. So what you do with the cube is you cut off all of the edges equally. And when you cut them all off, it becomes the dodecahedron, which is quite fascinating. There's actually 5 cubes inside of a dodecahedron. And now when you cut off the corners of the dodecahedron, stopping halfway, it's halfway between that and the icosahedron, which is this Icosahedron, 20 triangles and 12 pentagons, and continuing cutting it off all the way, it becomes the icosahedron. So pretty fascinating way to understand how all 5 of these platonic solids are interrelated precisely like that.
So basically, the platonic solids can morph into each other just by some cuts.
Yeah, just basic, like you saw, the truncation. So here we're just going back to this one where you saw both the cube and the octahedron become this cube octahedron. And that's because this is a really significant shape. And we're going to see exactly why. The Buckminster Fuller identified this shape by up here. Anyway, here's the diagram of what we just saw happening. Cutting off the corners of either a cube or octahedron make this cube octahedron. But what's so interesting about it, and this relates to your meditation, is starting with a sphere, you can closest pack around it in a plane 6 more spheres, and then 3 more below it and 3 more above it are all closest packed. Now these spheres are all the same unit diameter. Now by connecting the center of these spheres together, they're all exactly 1 unit apart. And when you connect the outer spheres, it creates the shell of a cube octahedron. But with the internal structure, it's actually 8 tetrahedron that are all pointing inward, touching in the center. And so this shape is actually what Buckminster Fuller called the vector equilibrium. And vectors in engineering represents units of energy. And the fact that each vector is exactly 1 unit length long from the center out to each of the vertices, and then each of the vertices wrapping around it are connected with exactly 1 unit length vector around it. This is a diagram of 3-dimensional energy in equilibrium. The shape would neither explode outwards or collapse inwards. The amount of energy in the center wanting to explode out is perfectly balanced by the amount of energy wrapping around it that would want to collapse in. Hence the vector equilibrium. So Buckminster Fuller discovered this as a very underlying principle of how space orders itself. You know, we're used to thinking of space, in cubes, but the reality is, as you saw with the closest packing of spheres, and this is just a unit of what he calls the isotropic vector matrix. We're not going to dive into that, but we can understand, we think of space in an XYZ axis, which is a cubic vector matrix, but this is actually more how space is dividing itself. So here we can see in this static diagram the 8 tetrahedrons that come together to make this vector equilibrium cube octahedron. That's all of these spheres, closest packing of spheres connected together. So now we're going to go back to a cube and cross all of the diagonals of the faces of a cube, and then remove the cube. And you see it makes 2 tetrahedrons interpenetrating each other. The shape also known as a Merkabah or star tetrahedron. Merkabah is a word for the light body vehicle, but star tetrahedron, as you can see. And you saw that 8 tetrahedron actually come together around a central octahedron. So this star tetrahedron is a kind of a corollary to the cube octahedron vector equilibrium, where you see here you see the 8 tetrahedron that point out. And so as you saw, the vector equilibrium is 8 tetrahedron pointing in, a star tetrahedron is 8 tetrahedron pointing out. So that's going to bring us to another one. That is 8 star tetrahedron connected together. This is a shape discovered by this physicist Nassim Haramein that he calls the structure of the vacuum. So it's actually taking Buckminster Fuller's vector equilibrium to the next level. And because what you'll see here in this static diagram of it, it's actually a star tetrahedron and a vector equilibrium interpenetrating each other. And so it then creates these 8-star tetrahedrons that are all touching radially to each other. And I know I'm going really fast and it's really complex information, but there's a lot of more to cover today. So we might just have to come back to this. Like when I first learned about this structure of the vacuum and learned of Nassim's work, it took me, I spent years looking at it, and I actually went and welded one of them up together to understand it better. And when I welded one, I painted it out so that you could see, starting in the very center are the purple struts from the very center point that go out to a light blue central cube octahedron. And as you continue out to the surface of the whole thing, you see there's a double size yellow cube octahedron, as well as a red and orange star tetrahedron. So the way to understand this is that this is a fractal cube octahedron star tetrahedron. And the reason why it's fractal is because if you were to half each of these struts, you would have the exact same shape, half size in the center. And if you double these struts in length, you'd have a double size one surrounding the whole thing. And you could actually half or double the struts infinitely in or infinitely out, and the shape would remain exactly the same, which is the definition of a fractal. As you zoom in or out of fractals, they stay the same. And so this explains how space is fractal in nature, but this is also actually explaining just the underlying energy of space. Like in quantum physics, they see that the vacuum is actually full of nearly infinite energy, and they call this the vacuum catastrophe. Well, anyway, this is how the energy is completely balanced out so that it looks like a vacuum. So the structure of the vacuum. There's so many interesting things to be said about this because it's 64 tetrahedrons that are made of 6 lines, and the I Ching has 64 hexagrams of 6 lines. So there's a 1-to-1 correlation between this and the I Ching, which is the Chinese divination that kind of explains everything that happens in the universe. Another interesting correlation I discovered is in the Tibetan Buddhism, there's the Heart Sutra that starts off by saying, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And I would say that structure and form are synonymous, and emptiness and vacuum. So this is the form of the emptiness, or as Nassim titles it, the structure of the vacuum. So, this is actually more conceptual than it is an actual physical structure. So understanding this as the underlying concept of how all of energy in space is ordered. And, Nassim talks about this being at the level of the Planck constant, the Planck length. Well, the Planck length is trillions of times smaller than an atom. So a Planck length to an atom is like the size of an atom to our human body. So this is like at the very fabric of the energy of space. Another interesting aspect of it is when it's projected two-dimensionally, all of the intersections of the structure of the vacuum are 1-to-1 correlation to the two-dimensional sacred geometry diagram, the flower of life. So we're going to now jump into the last 2 Platonic solids, the Icosahedron and Dodecahedron. As we saw earlier, by truncating off the corners of them to the midpoint, it makes this shape that's halfway between them, an Icosahedron, 20 triangles and 12 pentagons. And I'm explaining all of these because all of these will be employed later in the portal. So now we jump into another relationship between the dodecahedron and the icosahedron by stellating out each of the faces of a dodecahedron into a stellated dodecahedron, and then connecting the vertices of them together makes an icosahedron. So it's very fascinating how these 2 shapes, icosahedron and dodecahedron, are related to each other, just like the cube and the octahedron had that interrelationship. So now we're going to jump to a shape that I only learned about in 2011. And, I want to go back and just hold it. I don't know. I guess I can hold it static. Before I let the animation run, I'm going to talk for a moment about this shape that's called a rhombic triacontahedron. A rhombic is a diamond shape. And so that's also interesting to know, because when we get into the portals, you'll see why I chose the word diamond for the first portal, because it's based also on a rhombus. Well, this shape I learned about in a video by Drunvalo Melchizedek called Birth of a New Humanity. And it's linked through my Transportals website if you want to see that. And in it, he talks about the Earth's energy body evolving. And he says that these researchers discovered that this evolution of the Earth's energy grid is evolving to this shape, a rhombic triacontahedron. And so I decided that I would base a portal on that so that it would be like a space that people could align their energy body to. We'll get into that. But now we're going to dive into the significance of this shape, this 30 rhombic shape. So by crossing the long diagonal of a rhombic dodecahedron, it makes an icosahedron. And then crossing the short diagonal of each face makes a dodecahedron. And what's really interesting is that the ratio of the long to short diagonal is exactly golden ratio. So this would be a golden ratio dodecahedron and icosahedron, where their edges of each of these shapes are an exactly golden ratio. So here you see the two shapes now interpenetrating each other inside of this rhombic triacontahedron. And then very interestingly enough, though, is when you connect where all of the intersections of those two shapes, it makes the icosahedron. So it's just one more step removed from the shape we learned about previously. So we're going to see all three of these shapes now, the dodecahedron, icosahedron, and icosahedron, all contained within the rhombic triacontahedron. And here is a static diagram showing all of those shapes that will be included in the upcoming book called Portal to the New Earth. So that ends this very intense deep dive into the three-dimensional geometries that I use. So we're going to now jump into the transportals. Before I do,
Harlan,
Denise,
yes.
With you comment or questions.
Wow. I mean, there's so much with sacred geometry. I wish a couple of people were going to jump in from the group to potentially ask questions. But this basically, you're saying the sacred geometry is the underlying energy network and principle of the fabric of reality, that every single one of these geometries are smaller than an atom, and they are about energy and form. So that is so interesting that the fabric of reality is based on all these energy lines and these experiences and this play of come and go, movement and creation. So can you tell a little bit about how we are connected to that?
Well, you used a really interesting word, form. Obviously, these geometries are forms, and actually, I just learned about this a new group of people through our DSS that was talking about how understanding that the universe is actually more about information. The word information, and information relates to the word form, and so these shapes can be thought of not just as forms, but the underlying information that shapes the universe. So before you even have matter or space, you have to have this principle of the information that shapes it. So, it's basically kind of understanding that reality in the universe is really more about, information or consciousness or thought. And that's what then brings forth, matter and space and all the things that we experience as reality. So the geometries are these underlying information that allows all the universe to come together. So, once you start to work with and understand the geometries, and that's why I use them, in my installations. And, even though I try to be somewhat scientific and knowledgeable, I kind of do it more on an intuitive level. And also,
Right.
Because I mentioned very quickly, though, how Drunvalo Melchizedek said that this geometry is what the Earth's energy grid is evolving to. So that's a whole other thing, that the Earth, we think of the Earth as just this ball of dirt, right? But it's actually is more about the information that creates the Earth, and that is has an energetic grid. We talk about ley lines and, the way the Earth has energy body, and so the overall form of that energy body is geometric in nature and not just static, but actually the geometries that that the Earth is what creates the life on it, to allow the life. And as the geometries evolve, the life evolves. And right now, we're at this point of evolution of consciousness and the Earth. It seems pretty apparent now, and it's relating to this evolution of the geometry. So that's that's what inspires these transportals. It's a key part. It wasn't what inspired the first one. But,
so you would say that the information underlying the fabric of reality is a kind of organized information at the smallest level. So when we think about creating, when we do these guided meditations, and when we do our own personal meditations, and when we do our own connection to our embodiment and connection to each other, using these sacred geometries may help us organize our own thoughts, our own interrelations and connections in a beautiful way.
More than that, it's going to help us create our reality, transform the Earth. And I just watched some video on someone who was healed themselves from a serious back injury, had all the metal taken out. And he connected with Joe Dispenza, who talks about this. But he went into what he calls the quantum field. That's what this geometry is, to miraculously rebuild his spine. So and that's why it was even saying in that Heart Sutra, the form of the emptiness. Once we understand these geometries, we can tap into the quantum field. And this is the key for how we're going to, create the reality that we want, and for ourselves and for everyone. It's really profound, actually.
So tap into the quantum field and almost use the momentum, how would you suggest we tap into the quantum field and use these sacred geometries?
Instead of thinking we have to fix the world through a mechanistic, clean things up, do things, we understand that reality is a hologram. It's consciousness projecting in through the quantum field. So it's going to the very, almost the operating system, of how reality works, rather than I mean, it's such I don't know, I'm getting a little lost here, and you're asking really profound questions. And so, I don't know how much of it we should go into it, and maybe just, and I see we lost the screen share, but if you want to, we have someone else.
I wanted to invite Ed in, and while we're talking about these things on a more deep level, we'll go back into the screen share and things like that, but I wanted people to be able to see us, and welcome Ed for a moment. Hi, Ed. He tends to be one of our facilitators for Awaken Dream Synergy and Earth, so he's come from the backstage. Would you like to say hello and say anything?
I love your talk, Harlan. Thank you, Denise. No, this is amazing stuff, and I have a background in quantum physics, actually, but also am an architectural consultant when it comes to building immersive theaters, domes, projection domes, and like that. And I'm always fascinated by this connection between, sacred geometry, as you're alluding to, is like an informational structures. And to me, when I close my eyes, I'm entering an informational domain. And I'm always fascinated by what is the connection between sacred geometry and consciousness, and in particular, the informational domain of the quantum holographic, quantum foam, informational field, whatever we want to call it, because it's not been well defined by science. The quantum foam, to my quantum physics colleagues, is nothing but a bunch of randomness, right? But we know that the very fabric of the universe has vast computational capacity and is an informationally connected backplane through entanglements. So something's going on there, but I'm always trying to understand those connections: consciousness, quantum, and then of course architecture and how architecture can affect consciousness. But anything you can say about that, I'd be extremely interested in.
Super cool. Yeah. So go ahead, Harlan. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, that's a big one, because we can think of all this sacred architecture going back, especially the pyramids and things from all over the world that are using things to that are, or temples in general, anything. So it's it's I don't want to go too far off on a tangent that, but it's actually kind of a really good segue for what we're going to dive into, because that is kind of like, why I decided to build these portals and bring them to Burning Man and other festivals around the world, for the same reason, that we have temples and other things that you go into them to, transform your consciousness as a space that shifts you from your everyday normal life. Once you're in a different architectural space and different, it can facilitate a shift of consciousness. And that was from the very beginning why I decided to build these. So I don't know, should we just dive in? Anything else you want to say? Because
exactly
once you get me started, it's hard for me to stop, and I've got a lot to, this journey started. Yeah. Anyway, so
most definitely. So
okay.
One moment, here we go.
Buckle your seatbelts, and you're going to get the story of the Transportals, which of course is not just at Burning Man, but started at Burning Man. So I started to go to Burning Man in 1999, which is the first year that the city was laid out in what is still being used, this radial plan of concentric circles, where it goes from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock, and between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock is wide open space, just pointing out to this deep, vast playa, and goes miles out away from the city. And, seeing all these giant interactive art installations that you can climb on and interact with got me thinking about bringing a piece out of myself. So in 2004, I created what I call the Diamond Portal, and interestingly enough, it was placed at 1111. We'll go into that. That's why I called it that. And like a lot of people see 1111 as some kind of activation code when you see it on a digital clock. And I thought at Burning Man, based on this concept of radionics, which is, I guess I should mention that briefly. Radionics is this interesting, new science where you can broadcast vibrational energies at certain degrees to heal people remotely. And so when I was at Burning Man, I started to see people and things would be at different times on the city. And I started to think how the time had some reference to the energy of it. But 1111 Diamond Portal. So anyway, what I decided to build was a large version of this little paper model that I actually made in 1984 while I was studying at Parsons School of Design in environmental design. And this paper model was something I made based on the golden ratio. And as you'll see here in this diagram, I took a square and tapered it to the golden ratio. So the top to the bottom is golden ratio. Centered at the golden ratio, I put a cylinder through this shape that then in plan view is a rhombus. And I made the rhombus exactly 1/7 of a circle. So 7 could fit in to complete it. And that makes the angle of the rhombus 51.4 degrees. And as you see, this shape, when viewed at a certain angle, makes a perfect heart shape, which is something I had no idea when I actually designed it and even was building it in large scale for Burning Man until I actually saw it. And as far as choosing the green color, I didn't actually consciously think of choosing green because that's the color of the heart, but because I had seen this green color in a vision. It was actually a DMT trip that communicated in colors. And I painted a panel this green color. I said, I'll just make, at first I thought, I'll make it black like the monolith in 2001. Then I thought, black is just going to get dusty. It's going to be hot. I said, it'd be better if it was some color. I'm like, what color? Oh, that green color I saw in this vision. Only after the fact did I realize green is heart chakra. And I decided to make the inside this contrasting red color that's also heart chakra colored. But also, through the work of Dan Winter, he discovered that when your heart is in golden ratio frequencies, your EEG, is when your heart is in coherence and you go into a state of bliss. And this has been picked up by the Heart Math Institute that makes these monitors to get your heart to go into, to be able to get biofeedback, to go into a state where your heart is in golden ratio. The heart waves are all in golden ratio. Here's a diagram that's going to be in the upcoming book that shows, what we just saw in that animation, how this shape is generated by golden ratio in elevation, and how the angle of the rhombus is 51.43 degrees, the 1/7 of a circle in plan. And so another thing I decided to do when I brought it to Burning Man, I invented a bass feedback device, actually back in 1980. This is the version I used later on. But what you see happening here is two bass guitar strings are being vibrated by their own feedback. That's a tactile transducer underneath the strings. And when you tune them, they're tuned to subsonic notes. People always ask, what frequency do you tune it to? Well, I've never been able to actually measure such a low frequency, but it's somewhere in the Schumann resonance, which is like 7.8 hertz. It's in the range of human brainwave frequencies. And by tuning the strings to two different subsonic notes, and I do this totally intuitively, it gets to a point where it starts to create a totally complex, random, chaotic feedback. And so I called this the Quasar wave transducer. And like I said, I invented it in 1980, and I lived in New York City for many years, all through the 80s and 90s.
Whoops. Hope to get Harlan back momentarily.
Did he go off, or was that me?
We're all back.
Okay,
Everyone's
here we are.
back. Can everyone hear us
Okay.
again?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
so I decided to. Well, we're back. Okay. Oh, I jumped to the next slide. So here we are at Burning Man with the 1111 Diamond Portal. You know, a few people, about 7 people comfortably and can sit inside the cylinder. But if you can't get up into the central cylinder, you can just lean against the face, as you see all these people doing, because the entire structure is subtly vibrating with these, like, constantly changing. It sounds like a big cat purring is the best way to describe it. And people, you didn't know what was doing it. So a lot of people would be asking me, like, how do you get the sound of the earth? Or is that the wind? It was a very natural, organic vibration that, you know, for most meditative state. Interestingly enough, I put it on a timer, so it would turn on and off 11 times a day for 11 minutes. So I brought the 1111 of its location into a temporal aspect of the piece, where you'd be sitting in it, and all of a sudden the sound would stop. And when it would stop, it was actually quite jarring, because it was so soothing. And a lot of people were like, oh my God, you know, make it come back on. It's almost like taking a fish out of water. You don't realize that the sound is doing that until it stops. And then 11 minutes later, it turns back on, and just by itself, through its own feedback, it just starts up again and starts vibrating the shape. So I made a pendant of it, actually, for the following year, 2005, that was exactly 11 golden ratios smaller than the full size one. But I went back to Taos, where I was living at the time, was set up over the winter at an outdoor art gallery. Now, we did an event on 1111 at the piece, and it barely survived the winter. I rebuilt it because it was severely damaged in a windstorm, brought it back the following year with a golden ratio smaller outline version of it. So to understand this, the original one is 16 feet tall and the top is 10 feet across. Well, this one's 10 feet tall and the base of this one is 10 feet across. So this would fit perfectly on the top of the larger one. And as you can see, I placed it exactly the golden ratio between the full-size portal and the man. And the portal was placed exactly a mile away from the man. So I divided that 1 mile space between the 1111 Diamond Portal and the man with this golden ratio smaller one. And now this is 2005. And as you can see, it's pretty empty out there on the playa. It's no longer like this. Like, you could actually, when you were in center camp, you were able to look out and be able to spot the Diamond Portal. Now that would be completely impossible. There would just be a wall of art and art cars and people. It's, you know, the Burning Man has grown quite a bit since back then. But it was pretty cool to just, you know, be able to see it so far out in the distance. So my friends helped me bring it back in 2005, but the said that they didn't want to help me bring it back to New Mexico and that I would have to burn it. So I put wooden wheels on it, and we actually rolled it over to the temple fire on Sunday night and pushed it in. And that was the end of the original 1111 Diamond Portal. Of course, the outline version has gone on to many festivals all over the place. This was an event in New York City, and this is at the 2013 Symbiosis. And, it's just really ergonomic shape that, climb on, like you saw these guys doing a whole performance on it. All right. So after I burned it, a friend of mine said to me, did you ever think of putting your portals on sacred sites and, working with the Earth's ley lines and energy body? And I had studied a book back in 1987 called Anti-Gravity and the World Grid. And in that book was an essay by this author, Richard Levitin. Well, this is now 2005. The Diamond Portal has been burned. And this friend says, do you ever think of putting portals on sacred sites? So I look up and find this book that was published in 2004, The Emerald Modem, A User's Guide to the Earth's Interactive Energy Body by Richard Levitin. And in the beginning of this book, he explains that all the information about all these aspects of the Earth's energy body is not scientifically deduced, but it's through him doing a meditation. And he teaches the meditation in the beginning of the book. And by doing the meditation, he contacts these higher dimensional beings, like angels, like the Seraphim and Elohim, who actually were responsible for creating the Earth. The Earth is not like we think in our 3D mechanistic world, just some lump of rock that just evolved through matter. It's actually a consciously created place that these beings encoded all of these things in its energy body. At least that's what this book explains it to be. That's the perspective and way of viewing it. So as you see on the cover of the book, it shows the Earth inside of a green cube. So that's one of the first things that he starts to describe about the Earth's energy body, is that there's a green cube that surrounds the entire Earth as the totality of its energy body. But there's also this green cube within every human's heart chakra. And so it's a way for us, through our heart, to connect to the totality of the Earth's energy body. And I thought that was so interesting because the first Diamond Portal was the green, all about the heart. And it was just a way to, connect through the heart. And I called the Diamond Portal a key to shifting the Earth into the next vibrational dimension. So now here we have this cube, and it's not just a cube sitting flat, but actually a cube pointing up corner to corner, which is what's being tried to show on that cover. So I decided to turn this into the Emerald Portal, and I'm moving from 1111 to 1212. And what's interesting is that, if you think of your body, the central axis being 12 o'clock, your heart is slightly shifted off to the left, which is where 1212 would be on the Burning Man axis. So it's kind of placed in Burning Man where a heart would be if Burning Man was laid out like a body. So here it is at Burning Man, this green cube. And we're going to see how I started with a cube pointing up and came up with this shape here. So starting with a cube, I cut off the bottom part of it by connecting the three diagonals of the lower three squares. So you see that, I can use my pointer, I think. Yeah, cut off the bottom, get rid of it. Then taking the diagonal across the top, I cut these three squares out. And on the bottom also, three squares. And by moving these three squares inward and touching them where these three squares leave the opening, it creates half of a cube octahedron. And then I sliced another quarter of a cube octahedron because it needed a pedestal to sit on. And then taking the very top corner of the cube, I replicated it to make a backrest in the center. So that's how I started with a cube and ended up what's now known as the 1212 Emerald Portal. So here is a quick video walkthrough of it as it was first finished in my warehouse studio in Taos, New Mexico, before bringing it to Burning Man. And we'll get to see the interior space and also get to hear the Quasar wave transducer, which is hidden in that central half of a cube octahedron. We're going to go into more detail about this relationship between the cube and the cube octahedron, but now you can just hear the random vibrations, especially if you have bass speakers connected to your computer, because it's more low frequency.
Wait, let us hear it. Let us hear it. Oh, I don't hear it anymore.
Well, of course, the
There it
problem
is.
with infrasound is it's below our sound reproduction devices.
But we could
frequency.
hear it. We could hear it.
But we're not, that's an interesting point. Even though the strings are tuned to subsonic notes, the amplifier and speakers really don't go much below 30 hertz, 20 hertz being the lowest that we can perceive. But, you know, anywhere in the 30 hertz, 20, 30, 40 hertz is bass. That's where you feel bass. So what we're actually experiencing in the quasar wave transducer are the harmonics of those subsonic notes. Because like you said, infra frequencies, not only can't we not detect them at all, but they actually don't have such a great effect on the human body. So it's a good thing that the amplifier isn't making the subsonic notes, and it's just putting out the bass frequencies. But the interesting thing about the quasar wave is these harmonics are all very closely spaced together. Let's say we're working with 7 hertz. That means the harmonics are 14, 21, 28, and so forth. So it doesn't sound like a musical bass note. It starts to sound like a noise or vibrational pattern. And then when you're listening to the quasar wave, it kind of entrains your mind. It's almost like listening to numbers lining up and forming new patterns, like things like that. I mean, it's the closest I can do with my mouth, but it's way more complex.
I noticed you have multiple strings.
2. I've tried 3, but I find 2 is all you need to create that complex random feedback pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But it also wants to go into steady state feedback. When you think of feedback, you think of like a microphone feeding back just a one shrill note, or even when you get bass feedback from a turntable, it just wants to make one note, and it tends to want to do that. So it's tuning it and adjusting it to just the right point where it goes into this random chaotic one where the notes are interfering and building up and dying down, rather than just a steady state brrr feedback, which is what most feedback systems tend to do. They fall into a constant. So this would be called like a strange attractor or a nonlinear dynamic or a chaotic feedback. And that's what I'm striving to. And, you know, and I showed this to Nassim Harriman at one of the events, and he was like, wow, that's exactly what I'm discovering is how the universe operates. So the quasar wave transducer is kind of like this symbolic representation of the underlying principle of feedback that creates everything in the universe. So here, so now though, what's interesting is besides building the solid emerald portal out of plywood, I also built this steel tubing outline of it. And what's really interesting about it is because when you see that, you can see very clearly that there is a cube octahedron inside of this cube. So what's happening here is we're very used to the 90-degree relationship of cubes in space, but this shows its relationship to that 60-degree isotropic vector matrix of tetrahedrons and octahedrons all in one space. So this emerald portal has gone on, and it's really fun to climb on. As you can see, this was a Dreamtime Festival in Colorado, and this was in 2008 in San Francisco. I showed them both out at a conference, this 2012 conference. Okay, now brings us to not something at Burning Man, but right after Burning Man 2006, that I built the Emerald Portal, I was invited to create for a 3-day event in this space in Brooklyn called the Lyceum, a 3-day event called Habitats. And so I created this, what I call the Abridged Merkabah. There are 3 outlying tetrahedrons that, if those were connected together, would make the upward tetrahedron of a star tetrahedron. And the table in the center is a slice of the downward pointing one. So here is the star tetrahedron or Merkabah. And here is how I took a slice of the downward pointing tetrahedron in dashed lines and made this large table for all of the performers to set up their equipment on. And then the upward pointing tetrahedron, I cut the 3 corners off of that and made these tetrahedrons that were made of scrim. So here it is during the event where video projections could actually project through these scrim covered outward outlying tetrahedrons and all of the equipment. There were so many things that took place during these 3 days, but a lot of it focused around music and video projection. And like in one of these, there was silk screening going on, and there was no stage. It was a completely immersive event where the participants were immersed with the performers in this huge space. So that's the only time that I've ever worked with the star tetrahedron or Merkabah shape. But which brings us, though, back to Burning Man 2007. I'm now finishing reading the Emerald Modem, and towards the end of this book, he talks about 2 different features that I inspired the next portal. The first one was a feature called etheric blue dishes that are in the landscape. They're miles across, and they will collect these subtle cosmic energies to then distribute into the Earth and into the Earth's atmosphere. And they're not physical, they're etheric. They're just there on these higher dimensional realms. But through his research, he saw what he called blue dishes. So that gave me the idea to make a big sky blue dish that you would go out to at Burning Man and you feel like you're floating in the sky. But then I thought, well, geez, you go into that, you'll just bake in the sun. You need to have something in the center to give you some shelter. So then he was talking about the fact that the Earth's energy body is composed of all of the platonic solids. But at this time of this evolution of consciousness, it's evolving to a shape between the platonic solids, the Icosahedron Dodecahedron, which we saw earlier is that halfway between the two. So I decided to move from 1212 to 111, also extremely far out, well over a mile away. I kept moving deeper. I love having my pieces be so far out that you're looking back at Burning Man. You're not immersed in Burning Man, but you're away from it, and it's something off in the distance. So I placed it 1111 out near the trash fence, and it was just a sky blue wall. That's all you saw was this big blue wall with one small entrance that faced towards the sunrise, which meant that it faced away from Burning Man. And in the center of it are these 3 nested geometries. At the very center is a dodecahedron surrounded by the Icosahedron Dodecahedron that's made of a steel frame with stainless steel mirrors, and then a large icosahedron shade structure. And as you can see, these are all cut in half. So starting with these 3 complete forms, I cut them all in half and took the 5 or 6 pentagons out of the Icosahedron Dodecahedron and just left the triangles, and then made the central dodecahedron, going back to like the emerald and heart and diamond portal, that same deep red color of the heart. And there was a, in the very center was the bass speaker for the quasar wave, but throughout the entire wall. And as you can see here, though, I collaborated with some people that wanted to hold some dance parties. And they were like, we want to see the sunrise come up. So I made a 30-foot section on wheels so that as the sun crested the horizon, the whole portal would open up. And there's a really great video on the website, on YouTube, that documented the Sapphire Portal, where you could see the wall being opened up and the sun coming in at sunrise. But then once the sun was in the sky, we shut it back down. The center section was actually received a grant from the state of New Mexico Art in Public Places program to be displayed where I was living in Taos, New Mexico, where they were doing a show on sculptures that related to the Earth. So I submitted this explaining how the geometries relate to the Earth's energy body, and it was actually set up for 2 months after Burning Man in Taos, New Mexico. That's Taos Mountain in the background, and this was the opening we did for that. Well, the central section has gone on to a lot of other festivals. Here it is, an Awaken Festival in Northern California. But for Burning Man 2008, the entire Sapphire Portal returned. But instead of collaborating with the DJs that held the dance party in it, we collaborated with a group called the Galactivation Sound Healing. And we held 3 of these sound healing events during the course of the week, using didgeridoos and singing, crystal bowls.
I might be in your video somewhere.
So that was the beginning of well, actually, I should take that back. It wasn't the beginning of doing sound healing in the portals. I failed to mention that in the Diamond Portal, one of my friends who helped me bring it there, he went out on the last the day of 2004, the first year it was there, and started chanting and oming and toning along with the quasar wave. And he ended up doing it for over 6 to 8 hours. And people would come and go. He would get them to start to chant with him. So in 2005, we actually conducted sound toning ceremonies at the Diamond Portal. So that was the beginning of doing sound healing in the portals. But this is where we did the full-fledged sound healing with all of the instruments and the full intention of it. And so this is something that I continue to do with the portal installations. But interestingly enough, people would just do this spontaneously. I would come out to one of my portal installations and people would be sitting in there with didgeridoos or crystal bowls or just chanting or toning along with it. These spaces are just completely conducive for that. And especially with the quasar wave, vibrating in the background, that was on during these events. So here we are. This is the pendant that I made of the Sapphire Portal that shows the little Icosahedron Dodecahedron in the center of that. And, it was really interesting because, it was sky blue in the daytime and it really felt like floating in the sky. But at nighttime, it also had the same kind of color and feeling as the night sky. So you when you went out to it at night, and also I put very, very dim blue lights. I dimmed the LEDs down till they were about as bright as stars, as opposed to being harsh LEDs. So that there was a little bit of lighting, but it was dim enough that you just felt like they were starlight, and you felt like you were floating in space. And it was in this piece which I understood that by sitting inside of the Sapphire Portal, it was a way to align your vibrational energy body to the evolution of the Earth's energy body. Or like I said, what I call the portals to be multidimensional vibrational energy body alignment tools. So when I brought it back in 2008, my friends from New Mexico that had helped me bring the first few years, they were all busy helping someone else bring a big project to Burning Man. So I had to put together my own portal collective to work on bringing it there that year. So for Burning Man 2009, one of my original members of the portal collective, Casey Greenling, suggested that the next portal be based on a stellated dodecahedron. And that because the first three portals were both green of the heart and then blue, which is throat chakra, he suggested that we should go to the third eye chakra and make it indigo. And since we named the Sapphire Portal, sapphire being blue for the sky blue dish, this was the amethyst portal based on the indigo color of the third eye. And it moved to 222 on the Burning Man layout. So here it is at Burning Man. As you see, I made the interior of it the color of the original Diamond Portal or the heart chakra. So this was a way to go from your third eye chakra and tie it back down to your heart chakra. And there was some research explaining how this shape is kind of a completion shape of all the platonic solids. That's on the website, Transportals website. I don't have it to read right now, but what will show is how starting with a stellated dodecahedron, by cutting the bottom stellation off so it could sit flat, and then removing all of these panels around the 5 surrounding upper points to allow access to the inside, created the shape that could be built as a portal. And I also made a steel tubing version of it that could just be climbed on. This debuted at an event in New York City called Figment on Governor's Island. And here is a little cardboard model that I used to, depict it, so I can submit a grant and explain to people what I'm doing before it was actually built, Photoshop to look like what it would look like at Burning Man. And here it is when it was just finished being built at the workshop in Taos, New Mexico, before being brought to Burning Man. And here we are back at Burning Man, it's standing inside of it. So you can just see that even though it's only 15 feet high, 17 feet across, with this space inside could actually hold quite a number of people. And, again, hidden below the floor is the quasar wave transducer. And I also, like I explained in the Sapphire Portal, the lighting was very dim. I put these very minimal purple LEDs around the outside and then the chartreuse screen shining on the inside. And this is the pendant of it that's available I gave these out as gifts at Burning Man, and they're available for donations to help fund the portals. So right after Burning Man, it went to Symbiosis, which is outside of Yosemite, and then down to the LA Decompression in downtown LA Park. And this is at the Whole Earth Festival at UC Davis, and it was actually shipped to Portugal in 2010 for the Boom Festival. And it's funny because you can see there was all these rocks in the area. I took the pentagrams of the faces of it, and I started to bring that out into the next level surrounding it. And this is at Lightning in a Bottle 2016, where we conducted sound healings in the space there. And then I also started to host my own event in Joshua Tree from 2014 to 2019 called Portal to the New Earth. As you can see on all of the invitations, it's featured, and it was the featured portal set up out in the boulders of Boulder Gardens near Joshua Tree, California, where I held the event. So now, while working with this shape, which you saw is made of tons of 5-pointed stars, I decided to apply that back to the original diamond portal and came up with this idea for the heart star portal. But instead of using the pentagram, which is 36 degrees, I kept the original 51.4 degrees of the diamond portal and made this golden ratio tapered shape that's like a 5-pointed diamond portal, now called the heart star portal. Well, it hasn't been built. Whoops, went too fast. This is a depiction of a little paper model of what it would look like if a 16-foot tall one could be built at Burning Man. But what I have built is the 10-foot high outline version. And this has gone to well over 100 festivals. And at Burning Man, it's mounted on the roof of my van, which is then covered. So it just turns into this art car, the Heart Star Portal Mobile, where we're able to go out and experience Burning Man on top of this. And right now it's sitting in my yard here in Joshua Tree, Yucca Valley, in the entrance to the Alcyon portal, which we'll be getting to. So it's able to be experienced even here in Joshua Tree. And here are outline versions that are 3D printed of both the Heart Star portal and the Emerald portal, available through Shapeways. A friend of mine was able to model these in 3D. So then in 2009, I was still living between Taos, New Mexico, and New York City. I was invited to be part of a huge Burning Man party for New Year's, 2009, 2010. And I'd been studying the work of Tom Kenyon, who does sound healing, but he also channels the Hathors. And he has guided meditations that he channels through the Hathors. One of them called the Holon of Balance, where you basically just envision an octahedron surrounding your body. So I decided to just take an octahedron and make a space that you could go inside of, with the intent that it would have the same kind of healing aspect as this meditation, to help go into a state of balance to transit the chaotic times that we're in. So here is the finished octaportal at this event in a huge warehouse in Brooklyn. And here is how I arrived at the shape, starting with the full octahedron, cutting off a bottom section of it, removing panels from the upper section. And throughout all of these designs that I build, they're always based on the size of the materials available. So I cut off the bottom section so that a 4-foot wide piece of material could cover this. And I cut out the upper section, so again, a 4-foot wide piece of material, the size that plywood comes. So I could actually build it out of 2x4s and 4x8 panels. And then I cut out 2 smaller pieces down here to allow access to the interior space. So after the event was open, fortunately it found a home in a friend's backyard in Brooklyn that they actually called their place, and they held like weekly meditations at their space. It was called the One Love Portal, and there was space in their backyard where it was set up. And here we are doing a little sound healing in the first octaportal in Brooklyn. So I went on to build a number of these. When I went to Portugal, I stopped in England for the Secret Garden Party and built this one there on my way to Boom, where the Amethyst Portal was. This was one built in Miami for the Moksha Art Fair during Art Basel 2010. This one was built for Burning Man in 2011. And it ended up at this Conscientia event at Boulder Mountain Guest Ranch in Utah, where they purchased it to stay there. And one was commissioned for a rooftop in Silver Lake, LA, and another one made for the Okeechobee Festival in Florida in 2017. And this is one that I have here in Joshua Tree at an event last December solstice. As you can see, it's lit up with this EL wire around the edge of it. Now, brings us to 2012, where I explained that I learned about this Rhombic Triacontahedron shape in that video of Drunvalo Melchizedek's being the shape that the Earth's energy body is evolving to. So for Burning Man on the playa, I decided it would move to 1221, which is also like an evolution from 1111, but also December 21st, 2012, the year we were supposed to shift, that whole prophesized shifting point. So here is the Turquoise Portal at this event. I built it in January of 2012 in Australia for Rainbow Serpent Festival. And here it is once I returned to the States for the Pyramid Eclipse in April of 2012, held by Pyramid Lake by Symbiosis, Pyramid Eclipse. I made two different versions, starting with the Rhombic Triacontahedron. The one in Australia, I removed 6 panels around the outside and allowing access to the center. And for the one in the United States, I did a different asymmetrical version where 5 panels were removed. I chose turquoise for this shape because turquoise is the color of the higher heart chakra, which is what we're evolving to at this time. And so I felt like being immersed in turquoise would help to activate the higher heart chakra. I made the floor of it the indigo of the third eye chakra. It's a way to connect from the third eye to the higher heart chakra. And all of the panels are crossed on the inside to show the golden ratio Icosahedron Dodecahedron. This is at Beloved Festival, and here it is at Burning Man 2012, and people, trying to make their way in, and here they are. It had quite a large interior space, could hold comfortably over 20 people. And this is the pendant of it that shows the facets crossed to make the golden ratio Icosahedron Dodecahedron, which is what I then decided to build for December 21st, 2012. I was invited to be part of a festival near Chichen Itza, Mexico, where I was able to fabricate with the help of Sachi Om by going to a local hardware store and buying copper tubing, just what I call the New Earth Grid Star, the golden ratio Icosahedron and Dodecahedron. Here it is being used in the ceremony on the dawn of December 21st, 2012, just a mile or two away from the Chichen Itza pyramids. In 2013 at Burning Man, I did a little retrospective, and you can see the Amethyst Portal outline, Stellated Dodecahedron, the Diamond Portal outline, the Sapphire Portal center with the Icosahedron Dodecahedron mirror structure, and the Turquoise Portal Rhombic Triacontahedron. And both of these had the quasar wave sound vibrating them. So for 2014, I was working on making this shape that's similar to the sky blue wall of the Sapphire Portal, but an earthen colored wall. And I was introduced to a group from Austin, Texas that was making a piece called the Pachamama Portal. Well, we decided to collaborate together in what was pretty much a seamless collaboration and placed the piece at 1144 on the playa. One of the key things they had was a 9-foot inflatable satellite imagery photo of the Earth. But in the very center, it was on top of a dodecahedron that had all kinds of sound healing instruments, didgeridoos and drums and stringed instruments that people could play. And these were surrounded by these lotus petal hammocks that they made. And I put the quasar wave inside of the wall, and the whole piece functioned together as this, seamless collaboration of the Pachamama Portal. And at nighttime, when you were sitting in the hammocks and looking up at this Earth, satellite imagery of the Earth, it really felt like you were floating in space, looking up at the Earth in space, or looking down at the Earth. For 2015, I brought the same wall back, but a different collaboration with an artist friend of mine, Kathy D'Amprio, who makes these paper mache installations always at the furthest point out at Burning Man. So we moved to 1155 all the way out by the trash fence, and we had a solar and wind power for the lights and sound. And Kathy created all of these paper mache beings, these blue aliens that greet you, this flame being that's performing a wedding between the Egyptian god Ptah and the goddess Sekhmet. And they basically could be thought of as the god of creation and goddess of destruction. So the concept behind this was this reformation of duality, or reconciliation of duality. There were also all of these other purple and green cats interspersed throughout the space that were relating to the burghers of Calais, that were kind of like the 1% wealthy people during the 100-Year War in Europe that surrendered themselves to the enemy to save their town. And their lives were then spared because they did this so altruistically. And it's kind of like representing how the 1% could actually surrender themselves to help save the entire earth at this point. And here is a photo during a global synchronized meditation that took place on Saturday, that was in conjunction with Tom Kenyon's work, doing a global synchronized meditation called A Bridge Between the Worlds. And as you could see, the space it could hold hundreds of people within it. And we were playing on a sound system the channeled Hathor meditation for us all to do this meditation with. So this piece then returned in 2016, and I moved it all the way off to the far side at 144, another sacred number, and it was very simple. I put the diamond portal out at the entrance of it, and inside we made the open spaces around it. There were 7 open spaces. The entire shape is actually based on a 12-sided shape with one shape, one of the 12 missing, but of those 12 sides, it's divided into the 3 sides that a sheet of plywood could cover. And so it's a 33-sided shape. And there were these cabinets inside to hold the various quasar wave and other things that left 7 open spaces. So we actually created the 7 chakras. Here you can see throat, third eye, and crown chakra. And here is where the base chakra and sacral chakra. We did the colors and added that, and had the wind and solar generator back, and the quasar wave, and there were also various meditations playing over the sound system during the course of the week. And that piece is now set up here in my backyard in Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree, and here we are doing another sound healing, but it does have the sound system built in, and there are Tibetan bowls that play pretty much continuously. And this is the pendant of the piece. In the crop circle-like thing is based on the wind and solar generator that was built for Burning Man. That was the logo for the people who made that. Which brings us now to 2020, where I collaborated with an artist from South Africa that works with the Elohim to do work to help heal the timelines that we're in. So she actually channeled this piece, which I then translated into an actual form that we're working on building. It's called the 144 Interdimensional Space-Time Portal, which consists of a 12-step pyramid that you can both climb on and go inside of. And the angle of this pyramid is the same angle as the pyramid in Chichen Itza. It's surrounded by this ring sitting on the ground and these 2 arches that are all covered with these symbols. And the arches are actually rings also. And so there's actually a little mirror that goes around the piece to reflect the arches so you can see that they're representative of a mirror. representative of rings, complete rings. And so these 3 rings relate to how we come into manifestation. The timelines are manifesting to create reality. And they're covered with these symbols that she's channeled that will be on there to help people activate. So here is what it would look like from ground view. This is a cutaway to show how it would be built and a view from the inside of it. We're actually scaling it back because to build this full-size version is totally cost prohibitive and very difficult to build. So it will actually be a little smaller than is depicted in this. But this is a virtual version of it that was created for one of the virtual reality Burning Mans. And here is the silver pendant that is now going into production that will be available to people to, and the pendant itself kind of has the same properties as the full-size piece. And of course, we're making them to help fund the actual construction of the piece. So thank you so much for being here to hear the story of the portals. We'll see how that one gets built. And there are several other portals I've designed I didn't share today that haven't been built. And luckily we have Ed tuning back in. We lost Denise. Well, Ed, and Denise is back now too. Well, perfect timing. I've come to the end of my presentation on the portal, so hopefully people will have some questions and we can continue or wrap up this presentation for today.
That's fascinating, Harlan. And indeed, I had no idea you were so busy building these portals. I've seen several of them at Burning Man. And wow, what amazing work you're doing.
Well, thanks. And, and just as you can see, I have my Portal to the New Earth website. And as I started the whole conversation off, the reason I build these portals is to help facilitate this evolution of consciousness or shift the earth into the next dimension. But ultimately, my main interest is in designing and building future cities or eco-villages that are the most beautiful sacred environments. And that's what Portal to the New Earth is all about. It's about these portals. It's about using these geometries, but it's ultimately about how we're awakening to this consciousness where we'll all choose to live and create, the most beautiful human habitations. That will be the next talk that I'll be giving. So I'm just going to leave it off here that's really my main focus is these designs and creations and studying other visionaries that have thought about it and start to then get other people to wake up to this and we can all collaborate and work on, building this, the way humans inhabit the new earth.
Indeed, that's a much bigger conversation to be sure. And I was very curious how your architectural principles with sacred geometry could apply to a larger community. And this group in particular, and a few others in sort of interlocking circles. Mark Pansis, for instance, has a group on eco-village support with a digital autonomous organization, a DAO, and NFTs to activate property. And we're looking for visions, of what to build. And the idea is to build it virtually in a virtual model and where you can prototype and play with different things. And then when it becomes, crystallized, then bring it into the real world.
Absolutely. And, like I said, Denise and I met because we're in the Buckminster Fuller Design Science Studio. And, I completed this website and, anyway, you just go to portaltothenewearth.com and watch the intro video. It's very short and it kind of sums up the whole big picture of this very concisely. And it's like I said, this is like for the next conversation. But like you said, these to work on things virtually, there's so many things that are coming about right now, that the DAO that you talked about, and all these things that we are coming together. We're all starting to meet. We're all starting to collaborate. I'm only just meeting you right now, and yet, like as we both see, we're both so on the same wavelength of where we're going. Not what everything we've been doing up to this point now is coming together in this incredible synergetic combination, and that's just now starting. So really, really exciting times, and hopefully everyone who's got to watch this Whether you've seen my portals at the festivals or Burning Man before or not, this is like now, the introduction, and take it to the next level. So
Indeed,
Speaking
indeed.
about all this energy work in this, we have Don Estes, who is a really interesting being. Do you know Don Estes?
yeah,
He was talking about these sacred geometries are created by an even more primal reality on the other side of the quantum veil in reciprocal space called real and imaginary, which is basically the actual and potential components of any reality. This is what Don has typed here. Potential components of any reality. On this side, they are combined into sine and cosine waves, but on the other side, they are discrete. Intention has the ability to reach across. And then he says, subharmonics are great for the body. If harmonized correctly, they can't be heard, but for sure can be felt with the haptic sensory system. So in regards to the sacred geometries and how that works and the sound and the vibrations, he works with vibration technology and has for years. He also said Tom Kenyon owned one of the first vibrasounds, which is one of Don Estes's the Porticles work. And I think you mentioned Tom Kenyon. Is that correct as well?
oh yes, very much so. Huge influence on the work.
That's so cool. So all of this is coming back to this. And I actually started this because I had a company or organization called Vibe Science. So it's about vibration science. And I'm very into this vibration technology. And I've seen your work, Harlan, at festivals as well, but I actually haven't experienced it when it's vibrating. So I really look forward to that portal, that piece with the pyramid, and the last piece that you showed. You're going to be showing that at Burning Man, the next upcoming Burning Man, right?
We hope. That's what we're working on. And also hopefully then installing it up here in north of Joshua Tree and Landers near the Integratron. So it'll be installed long-term, available to the public is the plan. That's the plan.
That's super cool.
And
yeah,
I just, sorry. I just wanted to, didn't mean to cut you off there, but I just noticed the chat. I've been so immersed in giving my presentation. And Nana just asked, could you share some feedback? And so it might be appropriate I could share a little feedback, but also on the Transportals.com website is a section called Testimonials. And immediately after Burning Man 2004, I started to receive emails from people giving me their feedback and testimonials about some very profound effects. And so there's dozens of stories I've heard. I'd like to just possibly share one, just to give, because it's like one of my favorites. So someone who'd been going to Burning Man and had seen my Diamond Portal and Emerald Portal, and then 2007 got to the Sapphire Portal. After Burning Man 2007, they emailed me and said that they are now starting something called the Detroit Evolutionary Laboratory. They lived in Detroit, and they were starting to host events teaching, urban farming and, yoga meditations and, just all evolutionary kind of things, showing zeitgeist and showing movies and gathering people together to activate them. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's cool. I guess you've always been into kind of doing stuff like that. And he's like, no. I was like a total normal 3D person, just had a job, had to go to work, went to Burning Man. I sat in your portals, and now I'm doing the Detroit Evolutionary Laboratory. It's like, it was the catalyst for him to then bring it out into the world like that. And there's all these other stories I've received from people that had these really, really profound awakenings and shifts of consciousness, which is my the intention why I built them. And so it has been confirmed that, they do serve the function that I intended them for.
Wow, I would love to hear some more of that feedback. Because what happens when they're inside the portal, they're sitting on this, what is it made of? Wood?
They're mostly plywood. Yeah, plywood. Yeah.
But marine grade plywood, I remember you said before.
And then finish with the finish on them is this finish that I learned from this artist friend. That's it's polyurethane with a color in it that's transparent. It makes, like, people, when they look at it, like, what is this made out of? You can't tell that it's just a painted plywood. It's got a very interesting finish.
Cool. So when they sit there on this beautiful plywood, they're having they're feeling the vibration. They're sitting there in this sacred geometric structure, and they're there with their friends. Tell us a little bit more about what happens there. Like, people play didgeridoo, people play music, people sing, people dance. What happens? Because I've only been
exactly.
when
It's a
it wasn't on.
container. It's totally just a container for anything to happen. There's nothing like prescribed. But like I did mention, that people, besides the fact that sometimes I do host, sound healing. So then if we're hosting a sound healing, that's what's taking place, and you just show up for that. But people would spontaneously do their own sound healings with their didgeridoos or crystal bowls. So we mentioned that. But if that's not happening, actually, there's a really, really interesting article on the Burning Man Journal, and it was written by someone who actually became the editor of the Jackrabbit, John Mitchell. So he found himself out at the Turquoise Portal in the middle of the night, and it's kind of cold and all. And basically, he wrote this article about his experience staying there till sunrise, becoming the portal keeper. He just decided, like, I'm going to be the keeper of the portal, and anyone who comes, I'm like here holding the space. So that's like another story of something just spontaneously arising. It's just creating a space where then people can interact and meet and, for anything to happen. I really suggest there's a few really good short videos on the Transportals website that documents a few of them, and it does kind of show what takes place. And I do basically say it's a space where anything can happen, and that is partly the intention, just to be open.
Super cool. Yeah, that's so beautiful to be able to take over space.
Hey, someone,
virtual reality.
It's Ed. We can get rid of it. Although I do want people to see portaltothenewearth.com, we could just go back and chat now to wrap it up. And you could stop the screen share if you want, Denise. Although we lost Denise's camera, and now we lost Ed. So I don't know. I suppose we did I'm sorry that it wasn't much of an interview and it was more of a presentation, but
it's great.
Chat a little
we
now.
have Nana here too. Let's see if Nana can show up.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Nana.
Hello.
All right. Yeah, well, we did cover a lot, and I'd love to, I don't know how much longer we need to go on, but if we any final questions or chats to make this a good interview.
We're just wanting to ask questions and talk and converse right now, so just for a few minutes, if you don't mind. Nana, do you have any questions?
I hear a lot of noise. I don't know
if
that's Nana's microphone or what's going on, why there's so much noise in the background. Oh, and so she had to mute herself. If you're going to say something, no, just unmute, say what you need to say, and then maybe mute again. Love to hear your voice.
Yes. So I was just wondering, apart from the feedback, which was amazing, the story that you shared that gave so much inspiration, is there does the material matter? I mean, it's work. Does the material matter? It's a very funny question, but does the material matter?
Well, I've always just done things on a really shoestring budget. So I have to just pick materials that I can afford. And they also have to be strong enough to withstand the abuse that Burning Man participants can do it. So, I just end up using plywood and steel. And I do tend to work more with plywood than the steel because, metal can get hot. It's not the most comfortable thing to sit on. So, and like I said, I like to finish the plywood with a nice finish. So I'm just doing things, because of practicality. But the materials do seem to serve the function. And so, no, I'm not really thinking too much in terms of the essence of what the materials lend towards it. It's really about the form and the colors and the sound. It's really about, and a lot of people then like to be real high tech. Oh, video projections or LEDs or make things super high tech. And I'm really more about keeping it very, very minimal, very simple. Just about keeping the geometric forms, the color, the lighting should be very minimal and soothing, and even in conceiving this new Earth. I mean, technology is, pretty amazing what we're doing with technology, but actually nature and life itself is the highest form of technology. And the type of technology that humans are creating is actually, even though these computers and phones and all this high-tech stuff seem extremely high-tech, I see it as very crude, and the world I want to live in will have some of this kind of high-tech digital stuff, but very minimally, to use just in the most effective way to help us, make the world as beautiful as possible. And I just want to be surrounded by beautiful trees and animals and water that's pure and nature as much as possible, even in our built environment, and not have, all kinds of crazy technology and lighting and computers running everything. Like, mind and nature is the highest level. And that's like the bioorganic natural world is what, and that's how like my book ends up, wraps up. The final paragraphs of the book, discusses that differentiation between it. And, it's kind of a heart-centered technology as opposed to like a mind or artificial intelligence-based technology.
Yeah, it's interesting, Harlan. Of course, Burning Man is almost the antithesis of that. It's blinky lights everywhere and tech everywhere. But no, my work in both the metaverse and digital domes, I think what's really interesting to me about that is when you project an immersive environment, you now can synthesize any form, and create the illusion of being inside of a cathedral or being in different sacred geometry spaces. And instead of sort of baking that geometry into physical, it's mutable and changeable and like that. So it's, I like the intersection of these worlds where you can build or prototype in virtual, which, building something physically, as you obviously well know, is a lot of work, and it takes, to actually manifest. And especially as you start to scale up and now you're talking about a whole community, that's a lot of work, and you never quite know what you're going to get until you build it. But to be able to prototype it now in a virtual world and actually inhabit it virtually is very interesting, that intersection of real and virtual.
That's a great point, because Burning Man did do virtual burns the last 2 years, and I did work with some people. At first I thought, no, my pieces need to be real and I'm not going to bother with it. But then I realized people all over the world, whether you look at it on your phone or you put the headset on, can actually come up to the portal installation and go inside and hear the sounds and experience it. And it is a valid way to experience it. I mean, it's not anywhere nearly like the real thing, but it still has a huge amount of validity. And then here in LA, there's the Wiz domes with those incredible projections on that 90-foot dome, and you go in there and they are doing some of the most amazing 3D projections that you're in this space, and all it is a dome, but boom, you're in like all kinds of architecture and all kinds of spaces happening. So I 100% see the value. That's not my expertise, but I would love to work with people. And then also, though, ultimately, I'm thinking a lot about designing and building future environments. And some of these could be experimented on virtually at first, so we can really start to think things through and feel them out before we actually go and start to build them in the physical. So yeah, the digital technology of modeling these things virtually, an extremely powerful tool that should definitely be embraced, but kept in its place. It's not the end all, it's just this tool. And ultimately, hopefully, we're not going to just be looking at these projections, and we'll be and then of course every now and then you see scientists say our world is a virtual simulation, because people are working so much in creating these virtual worlds, and then you look at your reality and go, and there is truth to that. I mean, ultimately, that is the truth. That is how all the universe and things are working, and they're just kind of getting closer and closer together.
Yeah, I love that concept. In Theosophy, there's the concept of the 7 bodies, or the 7 layers of reality, and physical, mental, emotional, and etheric and monadic and all that. And it seems like, we're adding another layer, the cyber, and who knows, 1,000 years from now, we might forget where that came from. It'll just be another reality that we move around in.
Or that the noosphere, NOO sphere.
Noosphere, yeah.
Teilhard de Chardin can't really pronounce his name, but that's what I would think it's pronounced like, I think coined that word. And that's pretty much exactly what you're saying, that level of just all consciousness existing there. But yeah.
Yeah, in fact, you mentioned the Wisdom. Those are colleagues of ours. I operated the Vortex Dome downtown LA for 10 years. And we're doing an event in the Wisdom this December 12th with sound healing.
Maybe I could get there.
Yeah, I would love if you could make it, and I would love to come out to your place. But there was a comment that was it Don Estes made. I couldn't tell from the list I have, but about infrasound and subsonic sound that's below our hearing threshold, and there's actually quite a lot of research in that in Europe, vibroacoustics. Where you subject the body to a sense of vibration. A friend of mine does gongs, John 9, if anybody knows him, and he has this like 8-foot diameter gong in his place.
Wait, John Sinclair.
Could well be.
That's who you? Yeah, because Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I know him as John 9. John is. Anyway, the gong thing is interesting. He tried recording the sound of these giant gongs, and when they hit you, it almost knocks you into an altered state. It's interesting. And he tried.
I'm working with John Sinclair. It's a 7-foot gong. I met him just last year, and yeah, we're pretty closely connected now. So I don't know if we're talking of one of the same, or if there's more people working with these giant gongs.
Well, the fascinating thing to me with it is that he tried recording the sound, and when he played it back, it wasn't there. And we realized, it's subsonic. I mean, you heard the harmonics, as you said, that are audible, but the fundamental, the lower frequencies were not. And so I have since run across several systems. One of them is for theaters that creates subsonic sound. And boy, that's very powerful. It can be used as a tool as well. And I expect that your system is probably doing that. That maybe you feel it rather than it being pushed through the air, but it's those sub frequencies. Yeah,
that's the idea. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Denise, any more questions coming in? I'm trying to go between the YouTube here and looking at the various comments.
Let's see.
I did, by the way, put a link to that Wisdom event in there. Those guys have been doing some amazing kind of presentations. We've been distributing shows like Mesmerica is one of our shows that we've distributed to 33 domes across the country so far until the pandemic hit. And people, it's really interesting when you fill someone's field of vision, which architectural spaces obviously do. It has a more profound effect on the brain than watching a rectangular screen, on a computer or on a wall. So working in architectural spaces is one of the immersive arts, if you will, where you actually can come into and inhabit these spaces. And the headsets are okay. You can move around and you have agency and all that. The domes, you actually get a wider instantaneous field of view surrounding you, and it really activates your sense of balance and everything when the image moves or whatever. But what we found is we can tell stories that go into the realm of consciousness, as well as cosmological cinema out in the cosmos in the world. You can also take people on inner journeys. And that's what's so fascinating about these spaces you're building, is that creates a container for contemplative, that kind of pulls you out of ordinary reality and puts you in a different sort of a reality that is conducive to contemplation.
Yeah, that's what I felt like, especially those spaces, with the wall around it. When you're at Burning Man and then you go into that space, it's like you're not at Burning Man anymore. You're somewhere else completely. You know, you're cut off from all that other stimulation, and you're just in this one space there. So
yeah, I remember taking refuge in your space during a dust storm once. Yeah.
I just want to mention that there are some questions or some people making some comments. Great Works Alliance, Nate and Lyra said Earth ships would be amazing to incorporate when possible. What do you think about that, Harlan? For sure,
well,
we're all
you know,
about
I've lived in Taos, New Mexico, and I know, you know, the whole Earthship community there. The principles of Earthship are incredible. The actual execution, building them out of tires and the slanted glass and these things, I find somewhat flawed. And it's, you know, even though it's still going along, it's a great idea. But I think, you know, we're just working with the principles, you know, that everything is cyclical, that our water goes to grow plants, that we're generating our own power. You know, the underlying principle of Earthships is great. Just like I'm also hugely inspired by Paolo Solari's concept of arcology. And, you know, he was building this one out in Arizona called Arcosanti that never got very far along. And I, again, feel like the concepts and principles of arcology are absolutely incredible, and what we definitely need to be employing in creating, you know, future three-dimensional megastructure city designs, but not necessarily the way that Paolo went about it. It's the same as how I feel about the Earthships with Michael Reynolds' way of implementing his concepts. It doesn't seem to be the most practical path, and I think other people, once they understand it, we can take it to the next level. And that's, like I say, I'll be, when we do my next presentation on my future environments, you'll get to see my arcology that I designed, that I feel like takes Paolo's principles and brings it to a more practical, functional level of how it could be the concept of arcology, architecture and ecology integrated together into a 3D megastructure city.
Harlan, this is so amazing. Like, I really look forward to these happening more. Like, we want one in Tulum. We want this. Like, there was the art with me, the care with me, the purr with me, all this with me, and then we have the things happening in Florida. And we created a virtual reality space last year at Burning Man, and then I've been in Tulum dreaming up retreats, and it's happening, like, where we actually go on retreat and we actually are in intentional space of sacred geometric portals where we regularly go in there, not just at a festival for a weekend or a week, but like that is there installed on the land, and we get to have retreats weekly, monthly, regularly on certain dates, you know, certain portal dates, and we can have these all around the world and connected virtual reality, so we can really connect all kinds of people and then get into these meditative states, get into this space, and have a whole cohort, a whole group, a bunch of us like that. That's why we're here, Awaken Dream Earth. We're all in this resonant field of like, how do we get Earth into, and humans into, this resonant space of thriving, happy to be here, in love with life, in love with our interconnections, and our computers working. Sorry that my camera has stopped working, but I am still, you know, rising up through the field myself. But Nana, I would love to hear what you have to say about that in regards to, are you at, where are you, Nana? Are you in that community space, or tell us about?
No, everything's perfect. I'm in Paladora, the community space, and close to Tulum in Mexico. And yeah, what you've been describing was so resonant. I don't know. I don't want to say too much because I don't feel like we need too many words sometimes. But the clock is very resonant, and the building of the meta space is very resonant, and building community space is very resonant. And when I ask about materials, I maybe had two things in mind. So I don't know if you're familiar with Peposplan. It's a city south of Mexico City in the mountains. And so for those that don't know, the city is actually built on a big quartz crystal, and the mountains have copper inside. And so the phone doesn't work in there. It's basically a big organ that's like resonating there. And so, well, the only thing that it doesn't have are structures. But like now, I don't know, you were speaking and Peposplan came back into my mind, and the crystals and the materials. And while I was there, I had this thought of like, it's beautiful to see all these things, but what is it not to see anything? So the complete darkness and the complete sensory deprivation. And I was thinking of these pyramids, to build like certain pyramid structures, but now you show us these incredible structures that have so much more deep meaning. So I think it could be really interesting as well to like next time maybe to not to open the windows, but to close them completely and have like a complete darkness, sensory deprivation inside. Oh,
there is a design for something similar to that. That's the portal of the 5 elements. Here, mute your microphone. We're getting the noise. It's interesting because when you asked about the materials, of course, I was just thinking about building the portals. But when you're talking about materials as far as creating our future environments that we live in, that's of utmost importance. And yes, we want to be working with materials very consciously. Materials do create, the space. And yeah, Peposplan, I've had an amazing experience many years ago in Peposplan. It's one of the most powerful energy vortexes on the planet. It leaves Sedona in the dust as far as you can just feel the energy, and you can see the cliffs are shaped by the energy. So yes, the materials that we build our future environments will be very consciously tuned into. But just, working with wood, working with stone, working with ceramics, just the natural materials we already know, but in a conscious way. It's not like we shouldn't cut down trees. We just shouldn't cut them down heartlessly. We should cut them down with sacredness and care and use everything. It's not like we shouldn't quarry stone, but we should quarry the stone with the most care to make things that are long lasting, and we revere and we realize that these trees and these stones are, we're all one. It's all one sacred, thing, that we're all interconnected, and they want to be used in that way. And so, yeah, definitely the way and there's all these new materials coming out, hempcretes and, other new ceramics. And we're right on the verge. And that's what I just want to segue into the fact that, I'm so honored to be here on this Awaken Dream Earth Dream Synergy call, and that you've been doing this now for 1.5 years, Denise and Ed and everyone who's been involved in this. And we're starting to come together and connect more and more. And, I see my role in creating these new environments is just a little catalyst. And a catalyst is just a very minimal thing that, when is added to something, makes things all start to happen and come together. So if we can catalyze each other into creating these, there are people out there that are also dreaming and thinking about this. And as we all start to link up and come together, it can actually happen really quickly. That's my hope. Some people will be like, oh, it's going to take 1,000 years and humans are like locked in. It's like, no, it's going to be turning a light switch on in a room. And I feel like we're just now pushing on that switch. It's starting to happen. And
yeah,
thank you so much.
We're awakening to the dream together. Thank you, Harlan, for being here.
Yeah.
Real pleasure to host you, Harlan. Thank you.
Yeah, this was great. I can't wait to, I know a few people were on it live, but I can't wait to be sharing this recording. It'll be, I guess, on YouTube and other places to get this out there. And then doing, like I say, we definitely have to do at least one more, because I've got the whole future environments that we need to dive into. This was just the backstory to it.
Excellent.
All right.
Well, we would love to do more of this. We have a few of us like Nana, Ed, and a few others that can help in the backstage and help create these things happen. I think we now know that we love to use StreamYard. I personally am very happy with this, except for that I would like to get my camera going. So we invite sponsors and supporters, even though we're still just, kicking off in kind of a small group. It would be helpful for me to get my camera going and have some good equipment to really help make these things happen. And we've been doing this for 1.5 years, and we have had some great synergies. We've had people meeting, falling in love, creating creations, creating companies, finding new jobs, moving across the country, and just getting to know each other and knowing our ups and downs, our challenges, our hearts, what content, like what our intentions are, what our synergies are. So it looks like someone has popped in, but we were originally calling this Awaken Dream Synergy, because it was about, how do we as humans awaken to our personal dreams yet together? And how do we synergize on that in a way that creates the earth that we came here to live? Like, I know that I came here with a vision of an amazing earth, an amazing time, and an amazing life. Yet there was like all the stuff along the way where I was like, what's going on? Why don't these people understand what I'm thinking about, what I'm talking about? And what I found is that I wasn't communicating enough, and I wasn't communicating with the people who understood. And I was in my silo, and I was being told that my ideas were crazy. So I brought this group together, and here we are, all these people who are actually pretty grounded in these beautiful creations that are super artistic, super like beyond just, you know, dancing a little bit to music, but really feeling it immersed and coming through our bodies and creating reality through that. So I believe in reality creation, quantum leaps. I believe in us coming together and really choosing a new reality. I believe in us recreating our narrative, a new story, and that we can help each other do that, because as a group synergizing in that, we can help remind each other. And this group has helped me so much. When I'm down, someone's like, remember Nana, when you're like, but you can. I'm like, no, Nana, I can't. Nana was like, you can. I'm like, no. But she kept on saying you can. So and I had such a hard time, or excuse me, challenge. So we're rephrasing these words, but like having those people in your life that tell you you can when you're down, and or that you that you can pull this through, that this is an amazing dream, that we can do this. This is what helps weave our synergies together and gives us energy. We are the sacred geometry. We are the hearts interwoven and interconnecting, and we are that sacred conduits between each other's hearts. Like in Harlan's sacred geometric experience, we are those spheres with the heart in the center, interwoven, interconnected in the fabric of reality. Let's create bliss.
Lots to be thankful for, and especially thankful to you, Denise.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on. You're amazing, Denise, and so glad you're doing this. Someone else is popping in. I know we're kind of winding down, but
I know we are winding down, but maybe Em would like to just say something really quickly.
No, it's all good.
Okay.
Amazing.
Well, thank you for coming here. We were doing this on Zoom for a long time, and we have a whole group of people that would come in and out, and Michael is one of them. So thank you, Michael, for your energy. Thank you, Nana. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Harlan, for your work. Oh my gosh, I look forward to experiencing it. And Nana, do you have some sort of like ending comments or kind of a closing meditation or experience or feeling or feedback that you'd like to give, perchance? I would love to hear.
I don't know, Denise. My background is very loud and my thoughts are very calm right now. And I just made a comment, and that's yes, we can. Yes, cause we can. Because that's we can. It's already done. He did it. You did it. We're all doing it.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you, Nana. And then Ed, do you have some closing comments or thoughts or feelings or breath work or anything?
Rock and roll.
Rock and roll.
Be continued. Thank you, Denise. This was great, and look forward to connecting more with all of you.
Thank you so much, Harlan. And remember, we are elements of the earth. We are conduits of the earth. We are this beautiful energy. Let's create what we came here to live. Let's awaken to the dream. Let's find each other and support each other in that enchanted dream of the new earth. And let's go enjoy some portals. Let's transcend into the new reality, have a quantum shift, and create this reality that we know we can have. Love you all. Thank you for being here.
Bye.
Adios. Happy Thanksgiving.